This is a dish I prepared in the San Francisco French restaurant that I described in my book, 40 Years in One Night, and the sauce is based on a Paul Bocuse recipe. Even though I've left out the shaved truffles here, this is still an extravagant recipe because of the seafood and because of the volume of wine used and the amount of care required. But the end result is the epitome of gastronomic delights if you get it right. And really, it's not that difficult as long as you pay attention to a couple of the crucial steps.
To begin assembling ingredients for the first stage, I've got the shells and the tails from the shrimp, about 60-70 grams of shallot, which I'm going to dice up in a minute, and one bay leaf, but these are really small, so I'm using two, clove of garlic, olive oil, and the dry white wine. When the pan is hot, add the olive oil, the shrimp shells and tails, and start sauteing them. I have the heat here set to about 8, so it's fairly high, and what you're looking for mostly is an aroma of a deep shrimp smell in the air, which is going to take about 3-4 minutes to develop at this temperature. And then at that point you can add, we're going to keep cooking this for a while, you can add this diced shallot and the bay leaf and the garlic. We're going to cook this for about another 3 minutes. Okay, actually after about 2.5 minutes here, this is dark enough. It's dark enough and you start to smell some it's like gonna burn next, you know. It smells really good now, but a little bit longer it won't be. So I'm adding all the wine. We're going to bring this to a boil and cook it, reduce the wine down to a syrup. And after 5 or 6 minutes, you get it down to where almost all of the liquid is evaporated, kind of like making a béarnaise. Now I'm going to add water back in. And we're going to pass it through a sieve. Press down on it to get as much of the liquid out of it as you possibly can. And now to this we add a little MSG or salt. If you don't want to use MSG, there's absolutely no reason not to use MSG, but I know some people are paranoid about it. I would add about half a teaspoon of MSG to this. You also need to clean, devein the shrimp, dry them out, and put them with, sprinkle them with some salt and pepper. We're going to cook these separately on a hot cast iron pan and then set them off to the side. We'll introduce them to the sauce at the end. And here I'm showing you how I'm cooking the shrimp. I have another whole video on doing this. Remember, if these shrimp aren't completely cooked now, it's not a big issue because they're going to get a little bit more when they're heated up with the sauce again. And you do them in batches. You don't want to overheat the pan, overcrowd the pan rather. Now I have the mushrooms, the same weight of mushrooms as we do of shrimp. I'm going to break off the stems, separate these. We're going to cook the stems in a different way than we're cooking the rest of the mushrooms. The first step is just to separate them like this. And when you get all the stems torn off and keep those to the side. Now the mushrooms, depends on the size of the shrimp you're using. You want to cut these either in halves for large shrimp or in quarters for smaller shrimp. We've got fairly large shrimp here, and don't forget these shrink when they cook. You want to end up with mushrooms that are roughly the same size as the shrimp. That's the secret to the mouthfeel in this. So I'm going to cut each of these in half. And once you have all the mushrooms sliced up, I'm going to add a generous tablespoon of lemon juice. This will keep them from turning brown. It'll also contribute to the flavor. Now we can set these aside without having to worry about them turning to rust, and make the rest of the dish. We'll come back to these in a little bit. Now I went back to these mushroom stems and just gave them a quick coarse chop, and we're going to begin frying those in the butter. Butter's melting, 1 ounce, 30 grams is melting in the saucepan. We're going to let this foam up before we add the mushroom stems. Good. I've got the heat to about 7.5, so it's fairly high. We want to get these mushroom stems have some good color on them before we continue. After 3 minutes, I'm turning the heat way down to 2. You can see there's some brown spots on those mushrooms now because they're quite well cooked. That's good. We're turning the heat way down to 2. Now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of flour. And we're going to begin making this roux with the mushrooms in it. Now it's been 5 minutes with frequent stirring. I'm going to add the milk, just 300 milliliters of milk, the ground white pepper, 3/4 of a teaspoon, dry mustard, 3/4 of a teaspoon, and half a teaspoon of dried tarragon. We're going to bring this up to a simmer. Once you've increased the heat and got it up to a simmer like this, now you begin counting the time. It's been about 3 to 4 minutes now. This is quite thick. Now I'm going to add that madeira and continue the simmer. The heat's back down, by the way. Heat is back down to 3 on 1 to 10. So we're going to keep this at a slow simmer. Now it's been about 7 or 8 minutes now. This is starting to thicken up again. This is a time you need to taste this and adjust the salt level. It should be somewhere around 1.5 teaspoons of salt, but it'll vary a little bit according to you. Don't forget, you're going to be adding those mushrooms and the shrimp to it, and those will absorb some of the salt. So you want this a little bit saltier than you would normally. You know, it's not like you're making a soup and you're going to eat this directly. It's going to have other ingredients introduced. Even if you put 2 teaspoons of salt, it should be fine. And this is the stage we're looking for. This is quite thick now, as you can see. And we're going to transfer this off and weigh it to make sure that it's the right thickness. Okay, I just weighed it. It's 248 grams. You want it to be around 240 grams. Again, about the same weight as the shrimp and the mushrooms before they're cooked. Okay, here's the sauce we just had with the mushrooms in it. This has got this is the shrimp stock. It was strained, and then we've got an egg yolk. We're going to blend all this together. Okay, now we'll set this off to the side and begin cooking the mushrooms. In a large skillet with 15 grams of butter and 15 grams of olive oil, I'm now going to cook these mushroom caps, the ones that were sliced in half and then soaked in lemon juice. And don't stir them around too much at first because we want to get some good color on them. After roughly 5 minutes, you've got some good color on the mushrooms. I'm turning the heat way down now to 3. I'll let this cool just a little bit, and now I'm adding all the sauce with with the egg and the shrimp stock and all that. Cook this a little bit to thicken it up. Now, after just a couple of minutes here, you'll get to that stage that's commonly referred to as coating the back of a spoon. And now we're going to add the very last portion of the madeira, and we're going to continue cooking this a little bit more to get it back to that same stage, just a little bit beyond the point of coating the back of a spoon. It's not going to take too long, maybe 3 more minutes, something like that. And as we get close to that point, I'm going to add just a tiny pinch of nutmeg. This is like a 1/16 of a teaspoon, less than 1/8 of a teaspoon, just a tiny bit of ground nutmeg. This is getting very close now. I'm going to transfer it to a bowl in just a second here. Now this is what you want at this point. This should be quite delicious. Taste it. If it isn't, you might need to add a little bit of salt. Here's your shrimp that were cooked earlier. Just stir these around. Now this is the mixture that's going to get put into ramekins and broiled for the final stage. But at this point, you can just leave it like this until you're actually ready to go. It's all set. And the final step here is that we get some bread that's day-old bread. We butter it on both sides fairly heavily. And then after you got butter on both sides, you're going to cut it into little cubes. And now the final step is you spoon in some of this mixture of the shrimp and the mushrooms. Whatever size ramekin you want. Portion size is up to you, of course. And then you've got these sort of croutons. They're going to be croutons to put over the top of this. And then this gets put about 6 inches away from the broiler and cooked. It will warm through the shrimp and the mushrooms, and at the same time you're browning the croutons.
If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link. If you like my videos, look for my cookbook, now available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other internet bookseller sites. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.